Okay, so Ben Emlyn-Jones then, man. So I've known of you, perhaps should be the best way, for a little while. I've seen your work. I've seen your documentaries that you put up on YouTube, and I've seen your video blogs and stuff. But I kind of wanted to reach out because there's a couple of things I really wanted to talk to you about, such as the Thunderbolt Incident, your history with the paranormal, the supernatural, the weird, and the wonderful, because I guess you've got quite a history with that. So I kind of wanted to tap into everything, and we'll just go from there, man. So perhaps if no one knows who you are, how do you introduce yourself, man?
Sure, my name's Ben Emlyn-Jones. I actually used to be a hospital porter, and I'm somebody who, over the course of my life, has come to realise that subjects such as the paranormal, UFOs, what's known as conspiracy theories, government cover-ups, things like that, are actually real. A lot of them are actually real. Not all, but some are real. And not only are they real, I think they're the most important issues affecting the world today. I think to gain an understanding of these subjects has become a necessity.
Okay.
That's it, basically, yeah.
So how did all that begin then? So what was the first thing that made you go, you know what, there's something a little bit off about this world, a little bit interesting. I need to learn more.
I recall, I must have had, I don't have all that much memory. It's difficult to remember my childhood, for example, but I must have had quite an interest at a young age, because I remember watching things on TV, and I've got some books about UFOs and ghosts and things. It's something that I think when it started to get really serious was possibly because of the experience I had in 1996, which is where I saw something strange in my bedroom.
Okay.
That made it hard to remember.
So what appeared in your bedroom? What was the experience you had?
I was just lying asleep in my bed as normal, and then I woke up and I sort of sat up in bed. I realised there was a bit of a light in the room. I sort of sat up, and there was a little boy kneeling on the floor of my bedroom, and he was, I'd say, about 5 or 6 years old, but he wasn't solid. He looked like he was made of smoke. Sort of luminous smoke, but it was like he's like translucent. You could see through him, and he appeared to be wearing some kind of nightgown, and he had his hands in front of his face like that, as if he was saying his prayers. Okay. And so it was like smoke that kept its shape. That's the best way of describing what it looked like. And I looked at him and I thought, I wasn't scared. I just thought, wow, that's strange. I just thought, wow, I wasn't at least a bit frightened. And then as I watched him, he sort of rose up into the air, and then I looked. He sort of turned his head and looked at me, and our eyes met. I think there was some kind of meeting of eyes. Then he slowly faded away into nothing, and I just thought, oh wow, it's a weird thing. I can't prove that wasn't some kind of hypnopompic experience. Which I have had. When you wake up and your dreams carry on from when you were asleep. Although I hadn't been dreaming about this kid. It was just something that happened as I woke up. That was a remarkable experience. I mean, I've had several times in my life I've seen weird things have happened, strange things. The house where I lived when I was a kid in West Wales, that had something strange. There was something strange about it. My brother used to say there were parts of the house where earls lived. He used to use the word earl.
It's quite an interesting term in itself, isn't it?
Yeah, we wonder where. Don't know. He says there are earls in this cupboard. There are earls in this room. The earls are here, and it was like everyone used to. It was a bit of a family joke, Danny and the earls, But my uncle came to stay once, and he got really spooked out by something that happened in one of the rooms. He wouldn't stay there. He went and put his tent up in the garden, and it was just like, that's a kind of weird thing that's happened to me when I was young. I remember hearing a loud noise in my bedroom when I was like a really little kid. This loud clucking noise like a chicken, and I saw a big black shape behind my brother's bed. Just little things like that that's got me interested in this subject. And I can't definitively say exactly where I went because I don't have that kind of memory, but these I think must have influenced me over the time. And eventually I set up, when I started using the internet and the internet became a big thing, I set up Hospital Porters Against the New World Order. That was in about 2006.
Okay.
And it started off as just one little blog, which I still got, but it branched out into other blogs. Then I started on YouTube. I started doing radio shows on Spreaker and things like that. And I joined Critical Mass Radio, which was a station at the time. And from there it went on. I've also written some books The last 3 books I think are the most significant. So I've written 5, but the last 3 I think are the most significant, which is...
Do you want to tell me a bit more about those books? Or what they are? What's their titles and what do they generally contain?
I call them the Roswell trilogy. There's one called Roswell Rising, a novel of disclosure. It's a story, just imaginary, but it's about... I started thinking, well, someone gave me the idea, actually. It was Steve Bassett, the exo-politician. He said, what would happen if we got UFO truth instead of UFO lies from the government? And that's this simple question led me on an idea. Well, maybe because I'm a writer, because I've written fiction. That's something else I've been doing since I was a little kid. I've always loved writing stories. Why don't I write a story about what would happen if we got UFO truth instead of UFO lies? And so Roswell Rising, a novel of disclosure, came about on that. And then it led on to a sequel, Roswell Revealed, a world after disclosure. And then finally, the last book of the trilogy, Roswell Redeemed, humanity after disclosure. And they're probably the most relevant and interesting of my books, I think. So if listeners or viewers are interested in these sorts of subjects, I definitely recommend those books.
So would users be able to find them on the likes of like Amazon or Barnes and
Noble? They're in all retail outlets for £10 each.
Okay. So what's been the kind of feedback from them? What have people said? I'm curious.
Generally positive. I mean, I've had review trolls, because I've got some people who hate me for whatever reason, and they say nasty things about it.
What did you do? Why did you?
Oh, it's a long story, but for various different reasons, that is. But generally, feedback's been pretty good. People seem to like it. I had a 5-star review from Phenomena magazine. They said that's their top level of reviews. So
that's Steve Merritt.
They really loved it. Phenomena magazine really loved it. So so that's worth. It's definitely worth reading those books, I think, if you like these sorts of subjects that we talk about here.
Okay, so I'm curious about that. So what was it like to write a fictional story around a potentially factual event? So was it like real characters having a what happens afterwards, or was it like fictional characters entirely? Could you give a bit of a blend about that?
It's based around some fictional characters. The main characters are all fictional, but it goes back to, say, the Roswell incident of July 1947. I start it off there. And I have to... So there's an imaginary character in it. He's actually the journalist. The main character is the journalist who writes the famous RAAF captures flying disc story in the paper. He's the author of that article. I don't know who the real author was of that one. But then, of course, everything changed, because what happened in real life was that story was withdrawn 8 hours later, and another one was put in its place. General Ramey empties Roswell saucer, and it was called a weather balloon. And since then, there's been that cover-up has continued since then. In this scenario, no, that doesn't happen. So since it's kind of alternative, parallel world kind of story, like an alternate history, and so I had to think very carefully about what would be the same, what would be different, things like that.
So effectively, what would happen if that was disclosed then, and it's been ever since, or?
Well, I don't want to give you spoilers, but
spoilers, I'm sure.
It's not as straightforward as some people would think. It's actually quite a difficult experience the world has to go through. It's quite tortuous and convoluted, the path to acceptance of that fact.
Sure.
And people find it very difficult to deal with. Yes, it's a difficult thing for people to deal with, and I had to think very hard, actually. And I've done a lot of non-fictional work on this subject. I've done a lot of videos and articles and things on this subject on a non-fictional level. So I had a lot of good research I've already done for this particular thing. I thought a lot about it over the years.
I'm sure. So was that the kind of major UFO event that kind of took your inspiration? Because I guess that wasn't really public knowledge until, like, what, 89, was it?
It was actually 78 when Stanley Friedman interviewed Jesse Marcel Sr., and that's when it kind of entered the public domain, because then there was a book called The Roswell Incident, which became really was an explosive new book that came out about it, which sort of started the whole thing off. There's been many other examples of things like that which are less famous. I mean, it's true, it sort of wasn't really talked about for a long time until that particular interview. We may never have known about it, but there has been others. For example, the Rendlesham Forest incident, which was a very significant case in the early 80s. It was actually in 1980 in Suffolk, here in England, where some kind of strange object appeared in the woods at Rendlesham Forest. and it was investigated. There was a air base nearby, and RAF Woodbridge and RAF Bentwaters and security police from the US Air Force went out there to investigate. And there's what their reports there, what they discovered is very interesting.
So I guess that it brings us quite interestingly to the incident that I'm currently, I guess, investigating. I guess you've topicized yourself this Thunderbolt incident that happened in '87. I mean,
yeah,
because I guess when I gave, sorry, I'm trying to think how to phrase this now. So I came across it in kind of three different waves. Actually, I kind of came across it because I had a friend who I was going to a meditation group with a guy called Alan. Alan, he was the one teaching the tutoring. And then he told me, he said, "Oh, Christian, I know you're into this kind of stuff." And there was once upon a time I was a National Express bus driver, and I used to drive the route from Nottingham used to go through Mansfield, end up at Sheffield. That was his run every morning. And he told me, he says, there was this time when I came through Nottingham, and then he said he was behind a long HGV truck that was had something on the back that was in the black tarpaulin. It was strapped down. And there was two vehicles ahead, a vehicle behind that were military, and he said he was stuck behind this for 30 miles. And it was like going at a kind of snail's pace up the A60. And I was like, ooh, interesting. And that was the kind of first story I heard of that. So that was 2011. As part of my interest in the weird and the wonderful, I'd gone to the City Library, I'd gone to the Hucknall Library, I'd gone through the local studies libraries. What I found was really interesting is that at the Nottingham City Library, someone who clearly has an interest in ufology, the paranormal, the supernatural, had actually accumulated large box files of supernatural, paranormal, and UFO-like events into basically into box files. Loads of reports in there. And I came across I believe it was a news clipping from the Hucknall Dispatch, and that was dated in 1997. It was a reporter who had gone along to a meeting of the East Midlands UFO Research Association that was headed up by Anthony James, that was held in Basford, Nottingham. So it was a reporter's view of going to that presentation and then learning about the Thunderbolt incident that happened 10 years earlier. So this was a news clipping of that. So I'd kind of put that and Alan's story together. I'd put an article up on my website in 2011. Didn't really touch it. Didn't really hear anything about it. But Anthony James had actually replied to that, unbeknownst to me, and a few other people had gone, "Oh, I saw this, I heard about that. That was an experience that I've felt and heard. The Thunderbolt, it was terrible, massive explosion in the sky, red sky." So then 2015 comes along. It was when the documents of the National Archives had gone public for the UFO stuff, and there was an article in the Evening Post, and it was talking about the Thunderbolt was the most requested item at the National Archives.
Oh, really?
Like, really?
That's quite something.
Yeah. So this quote is from a individual at the National Archives talking to the press guy of the Nottingham Evening Post, and I'm like, well, there's something to this then. So in 2015, I kind of put all that in together, made a quick video, put it on YouTube, and I think it's got about 5,000 views. And most of the comments are, yes, I saw something. Yes, I felt something. There was an experience that night. I thought it was a plane that crashed. Something went in the woods. And then again, and then Billy came to me. Would have been like mid last year. She's like, "Christian, you really got to look at this properly. There's a lot of stuff going on up there." So from there, I got hold of. I found that there is online three accumulated sources of information and about the Thunderbolt incident. There's the one from Ashley Rye that's published on. It was on what's his name?
John King.
No, Stephen Lee. Dr. Stephen Lee. It's on his website, and then it's on a GeoCities website. There's one that's in a website called I don't know what it's called now. And it was
there was a very old. I think it was on Usenet or something. There was like an e-zine for UFOs, and it was John King who actually wrote the original article.
Yes, John King. That copy is published on a blog. So I went and got the official book of that. I got because he's the editor of UFO Reality Magazine. He was. So I physically got that book, and I've read the article through a few times. And in that book, he talks about that he was in contact with a couple of investigators who lived nearby, and that he was in direct correspondence to them, And so John King had wrote a piece about it, and that there's a section about his correspondence with those two investigators about it as well, and their information that they got, and that's in this Cosmic Top Secret book. So that enabled me to literally produce a lot of content about it. I can't find them two guys for love nor money. There was a guy called Dominic Belgin, another chap called Edward. Oh, it's going to bug me now. I don't know off the top of my head. I spent so much time. Douglas.
It's tricky actually, because I think Nigel tried to find them too. It was there's so many people who talked about it.
There is Andrew Emerson. That's what his name was. So thankfully, because I'm a member of ASAP and I know Robert Moore, I was able to get in contact with Bill Warfer as well. And there's a lovely lady there, Gloria. She gave me. She told me that Dominic Belgin was indeed a Bill Warfer member back in the early 90s. So at least we know the guy existed.
Good,
which is quite different. And that's kind of where things are. So that I must have about maybe 200 reports of what happened that day. And all the
That's a lot, isn't it?
It is.
That's an awful lot. I mean, I heard about it online, and then I because I used to spend a lot of time in the area because I had a girlfriend who lives in Bingham. And so I was visiting all the time. So it became like a second home to me. And I immediately started asking people around the area if they knew anything. And luckily, I've got a friend who lives not far away, Daniel Bostock, who's a ufologist from the area, lives up in Sutton and Ashfield. And I said, have you heard about this? He says, oh, yeah. He says he knew about it. He even remembered when it happened. And he knew a couple of people who basically experienced something strange. So I met up with Dan, because Dan said, and not only that, he says something came down on the ground. He said, I thought, blimey. I mean, I've managed to dig up an old Nexus magazine talking about it, and it didn't mention any kind of crash or anything like that. But Dan said, "Oh yeah, it came down in Thieves Wood, on the A6. It's just on the A60 between Nottingham and Mansfield." And I said, "Blimey!" And he says, "Oh yeah, the A60 was shut, and no traffic could get between Nottingham and Mansfield for like a week." And I thought, "Really?" So that's obviously like a big event, and so we went and had a look in Thieves Wood. I took my camera around so I could like document everything for the vlog, and we saw a few odd looking things. We weren't actually sure. Interestingly, we bumped into a guy who'd heard about it. We knocked on some of the doors of the houses, but no one answered. Then I got a message from Nigel Crowley, who had someone I'd not heard of before, and he said, "Ben, you're looking in the wrong place. I know where it came down. I dealt with this at the time. He's one of the people who investigated it at the time. He knew Ashley Rye and John King and these other people, and he helped investigate the thing when it happened in 87, or when it all kicked off in 97. And I said, blimey, okay. So I got in touch with Nigel, and he said, he'll take me he'll give me a little tour of the area. So we visited other locations, and he did a big long tour. I filmed the whole thing. You've probably seen the whole thing. And so Dan and I went there, and he showed me that there's a clearing in Thieves Wood. He said that's where it came down, but then it got back up into the air, and it landed up at Ash, what's it called?
Oh, it's the Warren, isn't it? It's,
the Warren. There's a place called the Warren at the old ruin. What's it called? That ruin.
Hollow, apparently.
And you can't get on there now. It's all sealed off. But there's gamekeepers there to take care of the place. But he said, oh, it came down in there, and then it was a salvage operation. It was like Roswell, and he took me and he showed me everything, and I sort of filmed the whole thing, and I tried to do a bit of extra investigation. This went into this little video I made, and from there I've been looking at more and more. And then I got in touch with Billy from the group, and I joined the group, and we're just sort of like looking into doing as much as we can to investigate the whole thing now, because obviously it's a long time's gone past.
Yeah.
But something odd did happen. I mean, I don't know what it is, but obviously something strange happened on that night there. Lots of people experienced something weird, and I'd love to know what it was.
Me too. I think there might be a bit more of a grounded experience to what some of the things what happened. I mean, out of perhaps all of those reports, only 3 people saw something. Everyone else can guarantee they heard something. The explosion. The explosion did happen at a house. It's on 8 Abbey Road. It was a water boiler that was behind the fireplace. I actually managed to get a hold of the council repairman who repaired the job in the morning. He contacted me. He got back to me. and the guy who repaired the chimney, he got in contact with me as well. So.
Oh, good, because there's lots of people reporting. I mean, I've heard everywhere, people saying, "Oh, my windows were broken. This happened, that happened," and I thought, well, it's.
Those two people confirmed it. A fire guy, he got in contact with me. He was told that there was initially a fire at a school, and then it was at this house on Abbey Lane, and he dealt with that. He was also aware of the fire that happened at the woods at Thieves Wood, so his team dealt with that. And that's where Mr. Walton, who was the fire chief, he attended that, and he gave the statement that it was the weirdest fire he had ever seen, where there was fire that had burnt trees on the outside, and the inside of the tree wasn't burnt at all, and the trees had blistered. And obviously, you've been up there; it's still like that even today.
Yeah, Nigel was talking about that. He said that there was something. I'm not a dendrologist; I can't analyse the trees properly, but Nigel pointed some marks on the trees, and he said. Some of the trees were there at the time, some of the older ones, and you can still see marks on the tree trunk that look weird, different from a normal fire.
Yeah, because I've got a drone, so I took it up there and took it like to the level so people can see all that footage, all them burn marks and scars and the trees and stuff. So that was cool. Yes. So I did post a video of that in that group, so you can see what.
Oh, I haven't seen it yet. I'll have to look at that. I haven't seen that.
So I took a drone up into the air, so. Really good, 4K shots and video of that. So,
I must see that. I'm surprised I missed that.
It's all quite remarkable stuff, really. It's and it's just up the road. It's
great, isn't it? That you don't have to travel very far if it's near where you live. You know, it's
so I live in Bulwell, so I'm I've got to travel to Hucknall, then it's Newstead, and then it's something in Ashfield. So it's not that far away.
Oh, I see. Oh, so you've got like a webinar for ASAP. I see you've got this already. Oh, I'll subscribe to your YouTube channel.
Yeah, thanks, man.
If I haven't already, I will subscribe to that. Cool. Right, so that's great. I'll check out the drone footage because that's really interesting. I mean, I suppose what Nigel and I had. Nigel and I had some big plans which don't always come to light. You know how it goes. But we thought about maybe getting some money together, getting someone to study the trees, someone to check the place for radiation, someone who knows what they're doing to check the place for radiation.
So there's some really interesting things about it, even more so. So Billy got me in contact with a lady whose name I'm not sure I'm allowed to say publicly or not, because she was a carer of someone who was a primary witness at the time. So this particular gentleman, he went to the crash site and he got arrested. He was taken, and it's claimed that he was threatened if he was to go public or go to the press, he would not have contact with his family anymore.
Is this the Warren site or the Thieves Wood site?
This is a Thieves Wood site.
Oh, blimey.
So that's a good question, actually.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, it seems a bit of an overreaction for a forest fire.
Yeah, so
it was Thieves Wood.
That's right. So this is what this particular person this gentleman's carer, and I say carer because this gentleman's now in his 80s and he's suffering with dementia in a care home. So unfortunately, I can't get a conversation with him. But so this carer looked after him for about 30 years. So that's quite. And he was very much a spade kind of chap. They had quite in-depth conversations about over that time about how his family kind of broke down and stuff like that. So his house was actually hit by something. So this actually is the reason he went to the police, and he'd had enough of things. And he went down to the where the crash had happened, and he was demanding answers. So in his house, which is if I should, in the presentation I gave to ASAP, I actually highlighted exactly where this guy's house is, and was rather. So part of the house, he went outside because there was some tappings on his window. He thought it was going to hail. He was like a car mechanic. So he actually wanted to go outside and cover the cars with tarpaulin so they weren't damaged, because of course he was repairing them. And so when he went outside, there was appeared to be iron filings falling over his conservatory and tapping on the front of his house. And as he looked up, he could see there was these two lights that came towards him, and they then went at the house and skimmed the house inside the building, but it physically stopped the house. And the house then suffered with subsidence. It went to the left slightly, and none of the doors in the house could then close after that. And the house was subsequently demolished about a year later. The the house also got covered in these iron filings, of which I've got a report that the Department of Special Sciences actually came to the house to collect samples. And that's also mentioned in that Cosmic Top Secret book. And so it was described that the police attended the house the next day. 2 days after that, 2 military gentlemen came to the house who were in formal dress but not military garb dress. So they were officers, which I believe they're the two who took the sample of this metal stuff. And then the day after that is something more interesting. A Russian gentleman came to the house with a translator, knocked on the door, and then asked him what happened. At that point, then he shut off and hasn't spoken to anyone since. Or spoke to anyone, because he was very much like, the Cold War was going on. He didn't know what was what. He'd already been warned off by the police that he was going to get arrested. This Russian guy comes to his house, and that was it. He didn't say anything to anyone ever since. And then
that's understandable. It must have been a bit unnerving for him.
Yeah, and so it's only when this carer came to me via billing, really, that's what happened at the time, and it ties into a few of the other stories that I've heard around the area. So something really quite significant happened.
Yeah. That's interesting that there was that. Firstly, the material that had fallen in the iron filings, and then the subsequent interest by the government in the debris.
Yes,
I just wonder. Yeah, it's possible they did some tests on it. I mean, we're hearing now from the United States of these very kind of studies that have been done on strange material that's been gathered. I mean, Bob Bigelow and Bigelow Aerospace were involved in this.
Yes,
and Dr. Irina Scott has talked about how she handled and did experiments and tests on various strange materials that she came into her domain at the Battelle Memorial Institute, and she didn't know where they came from, and no one ever told her what they were from. But she thought it's so weird because she was analysing their properties on the physical level, on the molecular and atomic level, and she said these didn't come from Earth. They were all wrong. They were the wrong kind of alloys and things like that, and wrong atomic.
Is this because they're layered, aren't they? Laid in really.
Yeah, I forgot what she said. It's in her book, but she said it's to do with the isotopic ratio and things like that. You can tell because she thought it might be meteors, something from a meteorite, but then she was trying. Then she had to melt these things, and she couldn't melt them in the forge at the institute. She had to travel a long way to get a forge that could melt it, so to get to one of the hottest in the world to melt this material. She was really baffled about this.
Crazy stuff. So actually, the other thing what was really interesting is that so when I was in Sutton Ashfield, I took the drone up in the air and I filmed some footage, and then of course I noticed the observatory was up there, and then I actually got in contact with the observatory and the group that works up there, and I had them on as an interview just a couple of weeks ago, in fact, and we talked about this particular incident. They had no knowledge of it, but it was interesting to talk to the observatory guys, because in the field that's next to the observatory is where the Hollywell incident happened.
Oh right, I said I didn't realise there was an observatory nearby, but I know the field because Dan actually showed me about that. This the group that's just been set up. That was weird, wasn't it? Where the kids start just marching around, suddenly they start falling down. Yeah,
it's an interesting one, isn't it? So where the Chinook helicopter landed in the Thunderbolt incident is the field adjacent to this place as well. So, do you want to perhaps just talk about what the Hollywell incident is?
Yeah, it's an incident that happened, I believe, it was a number of years earlier. Was it 81?
I thought it was 73, but I could have been wrong.
Oh, no, let's just check it out. Hang on. I've got an article about it. The Hollywell incident was. Yeah, it was. I always know something because I've written something about it.
It's July 1980.
Yeah, this is known as the All Fall Down incident. There was some kind of this marching festival where people, brass band type military marching, kids do these sorts of things and they dress up in their uniforms and they have instruments and they march. There was some kind of festival in the field on that day, and the kids, basically there was lots of parades of these marching children, and suddenly at a certain point some of them start collapsing and then onto the ground feeling faint. They describe feeling faint and feeling sick, and they start falling down onto the ground, and then many other people follow, and it seems like this spreads across hundreds of people within the field, and everyone's getting worried. People are panicking. starting to run. Parents are trying to pick their kids up and things like that. A number of people were treated in hospital, actually, for the various effects. But the cause of this strange event, in which a large number of people collapsed, has never been found. There's lots of people. There's been lots of suspicion. Some people thought someone was poisoning the ice cream in the ice cream van. The ice cream van vendor got fingers pointed at him, but nothing was ever found. His wares were inspected. There was nothing wrong with them. Some people suspect it was some kind of fumes from somewhere. No real cause has ever been found.
Yeah, I just while we're talking here, I just put up the screenshots, and there was a couple of stories about it in the press, of course. Well, I say a couple, just browsing this. There's loads of BBC stuff. The Wikipedia article has some interesting pieces on it. Let's put that to one side over there. So let me just put us side by side. So yeah, on the Wikipedia article, it says the Hollywell show is at the Hollywell Showground in Kirkby in Ashfield. Took place 13th of July 1980. It was the Forest League of Juvenile Jazz Bands holding a charity show. The entrance from across the East Midlands, 500 children from 11 marching bands were in attendance. And it says here, by 10:30, band members began to collapse without apparent explanation. Fainting was contagious. Children appeared to fall down like 9 pins, according to one witness. Symptoms were vomiting, sore eyes, throats, and dizziness. One girl describes, my arms and legs felt as if they had no bones in them and had a bad headache. The estimated number of victims was 300, including children, adults, babies, and animals. 259 people were taken to 4 nearby hospitals. 9 children were kept in more than one night. And it says here the exact cause of the widespread illness is disputed. Initial investigations by the Ashfield District Council included contaminated water pipes, food poisoning, radio waves, crop spraying. The use of pesticides became the favourite explanation. There was a 2003 documentary called Inside Out that apparently revealed the local use of a pesticide called Tridemorph, banned by the government in 2000, and it was described as a hazardous substance by the World Health Organization. But again, it wasn't the official ruling. That's one of the main ideas. But the main official inquiry at the time ruled that it was mass hysteria was the cause.
Right. That's it's a good case that's still open, I think. I mean, mass hysteria tends to get blamed for many things, and it doesn't quite fit. I mean, because what they describe is people actually feeling ill, not just being scared because someone else is ill.
Yeah, you make a good point there.
It doesn't quite fit. I mean, especially if they mentioned animals, and are these dogs or farm animals? Or?
Dogs and horses, yeah.
Horses as well felt ill, yeah. I mean, I don't think a dog or a cat would react. Would obviously maybe be concerned that something strange was going on, but they wouldn't react in that way. There was a similar event in Japan, actually. Where is it? I was just looking at it. Yeah, children collapse at Ripon, North Yorkshire. 600 pupils of the Outward Academy were taking part in Armistice Day service. Then some of them began to faint. Up to 40 children were affected. Many others complained of severe nausea. An 8-year-old student describes how the young attendees began throwing up on the floor and spontaneously fell to the ground together like dominoes. There's another incident in Japan which was similar. Here we go, yeah. This was a private school for girls in the city of Yanagawa. First, there was an incident in which someone collapsed onto the floor, a young girl, and then the next moment, many other girls in the classroom did exactly the same thing, about 26 altogether. I mean, I don't know if that could be just them messing around. I mean, it's hard to know. There's a mass hiccups outbreak. Oh my goodness. This was at Essex. That was in 2016, a mass hiccups outbreak. Oh my goodness.
Are hiccups contagious? Because I guess yawns are, but I don't know about hiccups.
No, hiccups are like caused by, I know, it's if you jump or you eat too quickly and things like that, you can get them. I don't think they can be caught from one person to another.
They're not a spontaneous reaction, are they? I mean,
it's a weird sort of thing. I mean, it's a weird kind of. No, it's a weird situation. I mean, I've heard of events like, for example, there was an incident I think where not long after the shootings in Paris a couple of years ago, somebody heard a car backfiring and they started running, and everyone else sort of started doing the same. And before you know it, there were hundreds of people stampeding, but that had a specific cause. It seemed to it's just an idea that spread. What happened was people saw someone running, they'd heard the noise, and they thought that's another shooting, and they ran. It probably gathered pace and became more persuasive as more and more people started running.
Yeah, okay.
Before everyone was doing it, but that's not quite the same. It doesn't quite fit with this particular scenario.
No. So would it make more sense that perhaps it was a gas or some kind of contagion? Yeah.
It would make a lot more sense if they found. Obviously, no evidence of this was found, but it wouldn't have surprised me if they'd found there was some kind of strange gas or some kind of something like something in the air, maybe some liquid, some chemicals that suddenly got into the environment. That would have made more sense. But no evidence of that was ever found.
No, it was just contagious fainting.
Oh my goodness me! I hope that doesn't happen to me. If I see anyone faint now, I'm just going to run. I wouldn't try and help them. I'll just run in case it happens to me.
Oh, just in case. Oh man.
That's interesting. That's another thing that fascinated me because I'm very interested in these sorts of things. I always like to try and get to the bottom of them.
Yeah.
So I went with Dan and we went to the field, which is just like a normal farm. It's just been used for normal farms now. And we just had a look around the field, but couldn't see anything strange. It's just like we knocked on the door of the farmhouse, but no one was in.
Yeah, I guess they'll probably be aware of it. Do you know if that event even still continues?
I don't know. I haven't seen. I should have asked Dan actually. He'd know.
I know not too far from there. They recently had the circus there, so I guess events will still be happening. But I don't know if that brass band still meets there even today. I don't know.
I don't know. It's you've got a name for it. What's it called?
The Hollywell Marching Brass Band event. Let's find out.
Hollywood. I just put my Hollywood Marching Band and see what comes up.
Hollywood.
Just the Hollywood. all I'm getting is the actual pages about the event.
Yeah.
Thunderbolt Incident.
Hollywood show.
Yeah. What caused all these children to fall down all of a sudden? Good question.
Yeah, the all fall down field. Yeah, I mean it's bizarre that there's these two kind of events, or three events in many ways, in a very small geographical area.
Yeah, I don't think there's a connection between them. There's a lot of time between them. I mean,
yeah,
6 years between the two, the UFO event, and then I don't think anything's happened more recently. I mean, there's all kinds of weird things in Nottingham, like there's these tunnels everywhere, these caves. I went there with Sue, my ex-partner. We took a visit. I did some filming around that area. There's only 2 caves that are open to the public, but there are hundreds of others. They've not all been discovered.
Yes,
but there's caves everywhere. These caves are all over the place.
Yeah, so I went with an archaeological team actually in 2018. Me and my son did, and it was the Peel Street caves, and they went from Peel Street, and they went through to Mansfield Road, but they went all under what is Alpha Street North, and massive wide open caves that go as far up as the Rock Cemetery, and the guy who is the archaeological expert, he's the city centre's, so he's the city council's archaeological guy, and he was saying there's all these kind of legends and stories down there of things like a troglodyte was quite a famous one in the 1940s. Apparently, being with one eye apparently was kind of a local story what was there. But actually, it turns out the entire caves are man-made and were made between the 1800s and the 1950s. All chiseled out by hand, and all the scratch marks are indeed still throughout there.
Oh, right. That's amazing. I went to the old prison where the galleries of justice.
Yeah. Now
some of them were built in those caves. I mean, there's like cells and things in those old caves. But that was all. That was really weird. Lots of weird things happened that night. It was a strange experience. There is weird stuff going on around there. I mean, there's all kinds of things to investigate. If you're interested in that sort of thing.
Sure. all in the kind of, like I said, the weird and the wonderful. So whereabouts are you based now, my man?
Oxford.
Oxford. So what's the world of Oxford like then, down London way?
Oh, it's
Is there enough history to keep you interested?
oh yeah, there's loads. Yeah, I mean, there's Oxford, of course, is famous for the university, which is like this weird. Excuse me. Obviously, before the lockdown, I was going out and doing various investigations. I filmed some of them. I wrote about some of them. For example, there's these weird statues in Magdalen College, which are like about 500 years old, and no one knows for sure exactly what they are, but they're everywhere, and then they don't have any records to prove it. It dates back to when the college was built, when those college buildings were built. Very, very odd things. Strange sort of reptilian humanoid-like creatures. It's weird, very, very weird.
It's interesting. There's quite a few references in the medieval times of reptilian-like humans or animal-like humans. It's like, and even the stories of Arthur. Of course, he fought against the dogmen. It's interesting. They also find themselves. Say, I had Richard Freeman on the show not so long ago, the cryptozoologist.
Yeah, I know him. Yeah.
Yeah, he's a good guy. He was talking about like part of our conversation was about trolls in Northern Europe, and how there was these kind of ape-like creatures that were recorded as being obviously under bridges generally, had nesting kind of patterns going on, and there's quite a few hunting receipts effectively where a king would go out and he literally would boast of like killing like 8 boar and 3 deers and 2 trolls, and it's like, so there's records of this stuff. So what were they killing?
That's very interesting, isn't it? That maybe they were very common in those days, but were they all killed? Did they die out? I mean, that's very odd. I don't know. I've read Richard's book on dragons, which is very interesting. That's worth reading.
I haven't checked that out. I will pick up all the.
But there was like these reports. I mean, the classic one of today is David Icke, who talks about like the shape-shifting reptilians, like the Queen or something, has been seen turning into a lizard and things like that. And it sounds bizarre, but you know, there's stories like this all over the world, in mythologies, in folklore and things like that. It's almost like, especially including among cultures who had no physical contact apparently. And I just think to myself, where do these ideas come from? Is there some reality behind them? And that's another thing that interests me a lot.
So I guess that takes it into that conspiratorial area, like if there are beings of humanoid shape, shall we say, but perhaps are of a reptilian origin, what's the process that allows them to transform into what appears to be a mammalian species? Even I find that to be a bit far-fetched, if that's even possible. I mean,
no. David, in his book, he describes that they can basically manipulate matter. They say that it's all about energy, and energy causes matter to change into different forms. And he talks about mammal codes and reptilian codes, and that their natural shape is having reptilian codes, which means that they form into a reptile, but they can change their shape literally to become like humans. Others have said things like, well, they can project an image. They kind of like project a mental image into people's minds, so we see them as they are not. Okay. It's rather like the film They Live is very interesting. It's John Carpenter's They Live. Have you ever seen that?
That's a great film.
It's fantastic. Basically, these aliens, for people who haven't seen it, the aliens are just controlling the world by projecting. Basically, they've got people under hypnotic spell, and they can't perceive what's really there, including the aliens themselves, because they're mind controlled by this electronic grid, and they're continuously made to think and feel certain ways by subliminal messages, and it's only when you put on these special sunglasses that you can see the truth. Yeah. Oh, very brilliant, amazing film, really interesting film. I'm trying to think. Yeah, I mean, people could say, well, that's crazy, it's just a story. But if that really was happening, for example, if that happened to be true hypothetically, we wouldn't know about it because we'd be programmed not to know about it.
I've got one that can see.
That's weird, yeah. Oh, I love it. I just love it. Such a sort of low-budget B-movie, but man, so underrated.
It is. You've got Roddy Piper in there. I can't remember who the other guy is. There's a guy, the black guy. What his name is?
I don't think any of them are famous. There's they could go through that. I can't remember what there were no like really famous people in it. It's like quite a low budget, cheap movie, but I thought it was really excellent. Roddy Piper's Yeah, he was really good in that. Yeah,
I thought.
I
So.
loved.
And it's really interesting. He's not hamming it up. He's playing completely straight as well.
Mm.
And is of a person who's in an extraordinary situation. And how does he deal with it?
Yeah, it's almost like it reminds me. The style is similar to Stephen King actually, because one thing that Stephen King excels at is he puts sort of ordinary people into really extraordinary situations, and then he thinks how would they behave if they were in that situation, and it's a bit like that.
Yeah. I think that's the one thing I really like about Edgar Wright, like the Shaun of the Dead and Hot Fuzz. You got ordinary people who face themselves in this, guys who are very relatable, who are now in a situation that's far beyond what they should be experiencing. Like, if it's in Shaun of the Dead, of course, it's the zombies, and in World's End, of course, there's aliens going on, and you got these four guys who are trying to live life as normal as possible.
Oh, they're brilliant, so funny, those films. And the World's End in particular is very sort of esoteric because of the element of these sort of alien robots.
Yeah.
And it's like the entire town has been replaced by alien robots, and it's like, well, it could happen if they look really realistic, or they have some way of controlling your mind so you see them differently. That could actually happen. And it takes a bunch of like drunk guys on a lad's night out to see the truth. I thought that was very good. That was very hospital portering, that is, I thought.
So, during a hospital portering, and I guess that's a segue into Hospital Porters Against the New World Order. Whenever I see them initials, that makes me smile every time.
Oh, good. I just thought I needed to find a kind of an image, I suppose, or I thought, well, what if I'm going to be online? I'm going to have some kind of blog, and what can I call it? And I thought, and I came across a guy called Jack McLam, who's an American. He's dead now, actually, but he had a group called Police Against the New World Order. And I thought, right, that's it. What's good for police is good for hospital porters. And seeing as I was a hospital porter, I'll just call it that. And that's how HPANWO was born. And it's gone from strength to strength since there. Yeah.
That's great stuff. It's one of those things that just make me smile whenever I see it. It's like,
oh, good.
Nice. It's a nice little nod, and I like it. It's cool.
Oh, good.
But what is it you're doing these days, then, my man? What keeps you busy these days?
Well, just I'm working. I'm self-employed, doing various jobs. But I don't really follow football team. I don't. Even before the lockdown, I didn't really have much of a social life as such. I spend all my time doing this. I think this is like something I've dedicated my life to. It's fascinating. It fascinates me, and like I said, I think it's really important. Getting to grip with these things is really important because there's so much deceit. It's what George Orwell called the age of universal deceit.
Yeah.
And that's there's a lot of. It's frightening actually when you look at how many things are covered up, but when you think about it, I think you can. I feel optimistic. I feel a sense of hope.
Do you think that things are covered up for political reasons, so certain people stay in power or certain people stay in jobs? Or is it because they don't want people to have a hysteria? So why do you think a cover-up happens? Is it just they really want to cover up someone's mistake kind of thing? Because it happens at work, right? You might have knocked something over and you go, shit, I don't want to get into trouble. I'll just blame nobody and it'll look like it never happened. That's a simple cover-up.
Yeah.
But when it's something a bit bigger, maybe you've allowed something to happen that has seen the death of, say, 10,000 people, and you generally don't want people to know that it was your fault or it was your choice. Like how MPs vote on certain things for and against. It used to be that they didn't tend to make those public, but now they are. And now you've got the decrying on social media of when an MP votes perhaps unfavourably of a decision. So they try to cover that up. And they're simple things, but so what do you think goes into a cover-up? There's
probably several reasons. There may be many reasons why particular cover-ups happen, including maybe different reasons for the same one. The example you gave was very good. And indeed, these things have come true. I mean, there's many conspiracy theories that have been proven true and a lot of them are exactly that. They're not intentional. They're not necessarily intentional. It's just something terrible happens and people don't want to get blamed. I mean, this was the Hillsborough disaster. Yeah. This is what basically happens with the Hillsborough disaster. It was originally blamed on the fans. It was just told it was their fault, and then as researchers, including relatives and friends of the victims, started looking into it, they realised no, actually the police did they did a terrible thing. It's pretty clear the police handled it very badly. The result was that 96 people got killed, and then they're desperately trying to cover up that fact and using their influence to try and prevent them getting the blame. And in the end, I think Duckenfield, the chief constable, I think he's chief superintendent or where he was, he's now in big trouble because there's many other examples of this. I mean, the thing that Chelsea Manning came out with, the guys in a helicopter shooting at these journalists, thinking they're terrorists. The government tried to cover that up. The Americans tried to cover that up. They knew they were going to be in terrible trouble, and they tried to cover it up. So that's another example. There are legitimately bad things. Bad things are done. The government are capable of doing all kinds of people. Well, not just governments. I think a lot of people are capable of doing very evil things for their own gain, and they will conspire to do so. We've seen all kinds of examples of that throughout history, and that unfortunately can happen on a huge scale.
Yeah.
And so when something happens and you're given an official story, it's not necessarily the truth. I always look into it. The cover-up of UFOs, I think, is clearly it has a reason. It's been done for a particular reason. Maybe they don't want us. They just literally, for whatever reason, they've just psychological think tanks or whatever said, look, we can't let the people know we're not alone, for whatever reason.
Because I think, even like Carl Sagan spoke about back in the 1970s, the proposition that we're either not alone or that we are alone, both are equally as terrifying. If we really are truly alone in the universe, that's terrifying. How bad that we're treating ourselves. And then if we're not alone, there's going to be something out there that is more capable than ourselves, or we should go and communicate with them potentially, or they need to hear. Both are really powerful prospects that we both need to consider. They're both are true.
Oh yeah, it can't. I suppose right now we can't prove that we're not alone. I mean, obviously there's no definitive proof of these sorts of things. We know that there are strange things occurring. We know that people have encounters with strange beings that appear not to be human and don't come from the earth. To prove that beyond any doubt would be like having a dead alien and putting it on public display or something. I mean, that's something like that. That would constitute absolute proof. That's never happened. Carl Sagan, interestingly, he did believe that we were not alone. But his where he went from about sort of the mid-60s onwards was he focused on SETI, that is pointing telescopes at the sky to try and pick out radio signals and things like that. He believed that aliens existed, but they were a long way away, and the best way to try and make contact with them was to try and listen for their messages.
Yeah.
And that's what he dedicated the rest of his career to. But obviously, if they've already found us, then it makes SETI a bit redundant. It
does, doesn't it? You think of it that way. So, if you were an alien race and you found that, say you were on Numa, as obviously it flew by a little while ago, and you saw the Earth and you went, I can see there's people down there, I can see some activities, pollution's going on. What do we do about them? It's almost like come across that little petri dish in a cave, isn't it? What do we do about them?
It's difficult to put yourself into their shoes, even if they have 2 feet. I mean, aliens are alien. To anthropomorphize the aliens is very, very tricky because, even understanding other species. I find it hard to understand some other people, to be honest. I find their behavior just baffling. It doesn't make any sense to me. Other species like dogs and cats, we have limited communication with some other species. There's a lady called Denise Hersing who's trying to find a method of talking to dolphins. It's very interesting that. By interpreting their language or developing a synthetic language. But at the end of the day, it's had limited success. Just like if you've got a dog or cat, you can have limited communication. But there comes a point where you'll look at your pet and say, why is that dog doing that? Why is he doing that? And you can't really explain. The dog will know because the dog's a dog, but we do a lot of things that a dog can't comprehend, and there's no way you could possibly explain it. You couldn't explain to your dog how to fix your car, things like that. So when it comes to actual communication or with the aliens or imagining what they think and what they feel and what they're like, it's extremely tricky. I think it's best just to go by existing information. Oumuamua is the strange object that came through the solar system. It was from an interstellar space. It only started getting really interesting, unfortunately, when it was quite a long way away from the Earth.
Right,
We couldn't see it.
Yeah.
It was actually beyond the orbit of Jupiter when it started to start doing really weird things, which made A.V. Loeb take interest in it. Because he thought, oh, that's odd. You shouldn't be doing that. It's supposed to be a natural object, but it's changing course. Things like that. By that time, it's really too late to observe it closely, so we'll never really know. But there may be others out there that do something similar.
Elongated, wasn't it? And had a shiny surface, apparently.
Yeah, it was all kinds of weird things about it. It was rotating on 3 axes. It was long and thin. Right. It's the weirdest thing. Well, no one ever really got to see it properly. I mean, there's pictures that have been published as artist impressions, but they're all based on it being a natural object. Yeah. They don't really do it credit. Like, we don't know it looked like that. It's just this thing, I call it the turd picture. Where it distinctly looks like a natural object, a long, thin natural object. Like, we don't know it looked like that. That's simply an assumption. The best picture we got of it is a big bright white red blob, and that's all we saw of it.
Yeah.
When it was the best picture we got of it.
As I'm talking about, I must put a picture of it just in case anyone's can see this. Interesting object for sure. And of course, have you seen that? Obviously, we landed on Mars again this week.
Yeah, that was incredible. I mean, that's this new probe, Perseverance. It's a very sophisticated machine. I mean, the lander is like it looks very crude, but it's actually a very, very sophisticated piece of machinery. And you've got the first sound recording on Mars. Did you hear the sound recording?
No, I didn't hear that. No.
It's nothing spectacular. It's just you could just hear wind blowing, but it's just amazing to think that was recorded on Mars.
That's
There's also the first motion picture from Mars. I mean, that's never been done before. We've had like photos, like still photos, but this was like a video that was sent from Mars, which was incredible.
So I saw the landing. That was pretty awesome. The flip camera.
Yes.
Saw it coming down. That was incredible.
I've never seen anything like that before. I mean, it could be that this will find life, either past life or present life, and that would be really incredible. I sometimes think that maybe at some point we are going to be told the truth. Would be what was called disclosure.
Yeah.
Now, it could be that someone in the truth embargo, as Steve Bassett calls it, has said something like that. We can't just say it all in one go because people will freak out. We need to get them used to the idea first. So let's just send this craft up to Mars. Let it discover life. And that'll put the idea in their head. And then maybe we can pick up a signal from some distant star. That'll then add to that particular mindset. Then we'll add a bit more here and a bit more. Then eventually we can say, guys, there are aliens and we've always known it. We didn't tell you. Sorry, we just didn't tell you. We forgot. Something like that.
Yeah. So what do you think about ancient aliens then?
Oh, it's interesting stuff because there's like lots of pictures from the past which appear to show strange creatures. I mean, they need to go back a long way, even into prehistory. And there's myths from all over the world about extraterrestrials and their interaction with humans. I mean, it's wherever you go across the world, you'll find these myths from cultures that never really had any contact until modern times, and makes you wonder where they got the ideas. For example, the grey alien, which was supposedly invented by Steven Spielberg for Close Encounters in 1977, that wasn't invented at all by his production designer. It was these things have been seen since time immemorial, and there's cave paintings in Australia, 40,000 years old, that show what looks like grey aliens.
Yeah.
So they've been around a long time.
Okay. So hit the old show some images of this because they are pretty unusual. These images that are around the world that do appear to depict what appears to be beings from, well, they don't look very human.
There's some I was just looking at actually from I think it's from somewhere in the United States where there's alien cave paintings and they are literally about 5,000 to 7,000 years old, but they show these greys. It's incredible. And so if the skeptics think that the greys come from Close Encounters, I think they're putting the cart before the horse. the Close Encounters is based on the aliens. In fact, Robbie Graham proved that. He phoned up the production designer and said, "Where did you get the idea for these aliens? These sort of grey, black-eyed aliens?" And he said, "Oh, I just phoned up one of the people who sees them. Someone who gets abducted." And people do. I mean, the people, again, it's the alien abduction thing, which has been put down to, it's been dismissed as individual hysteria or sleep paralysis and things like that. Again, it doesn't make sense. It doesn't fit.
There was a book I'm aware of. I haven't read it yet, but I listened to someone give a synopsis of it, and it's called it's an encounter, an abduction close to home, and it's a real case that happened in the 1980s where a girl, she's about 14 years old, she lives at home with her dad, and he had an interest in ufology, and he had an interest in particularly the kind of abduction phenomenon that was occurring, and what he kind of, over the course of a number of months, would make her watch these kind of shows late at night, would scare her. And then one day that actually happened to her, where she was taken, someone came in her room, flashed a light in her eyes, took her away, put her into a white environment, and then performed sexual acts on her, an object on her. And then over the course of 3 years, I think it was, is that she managed to escape the scenario, left home, and then when the police investigated their house, it turns out that actually he had retrofitted the shed, and that he was the one who was the dad who actually was taking the girl to the shed and then was abusing her.
I've never heard anything. That's a horrible story. That was awful.
It's called The Abduction Close to Home, is the name of it. Oh, it was the Joe Rogan show, actually. They talked about it a little while ago.
Right.
Jeremy on there.
But that's a horrible story. I mean, I've not heard about that one. But that's horrific. I mean, it's essentially the father was gaslighting the child. Yeah, with this very scenario that he then reported on her. Awful stuff. Mm. And you kind of want to, because people talk about, is that what perhaps the CIA or whatever of them are doing? Are they taking people to just scare them up? Or it seems odd, the kind of things that happen to people who claim they're abducted. It's usually sexual organs tend to be placed, tends to be potentially things placed under the skin. Mm. Disturbing stuff. It is. Yeah, there are certain alien abductions often vary in terms of what they're like. Some are pleasant, some are not. Things like that. Some of them are just neutral, but there are certain recurring themes to them, and that is, a lot of them is the focus on reproduction, placing objects under the skin, which sometimes they've been removed and examined, and they're very similar to the ones that Dr. Irina Scott used to look at. Things like that. Yeah, I mean, there's these things called MyLabs. MyLabs is military abduction, and there's even a scenario that basically that Dr. Stephen Greer says this, the Disclosure Project director. He says that if you're abducted by aliens, it's the CIA, and they're doing it to cover up the fact that it's the government that's taking you, and they make it look like aliens, to blame it on aliens. It doesn't quite fit because, again, it's quite an old thing. It goes back a long way. I mean, supposedly the first people to be abducted was Betty and Barney Hill, the couple that were taken from their car in 1961. But they were the first to be widely publicised. That's kind of where the modern idea of alien abduction comes from. But it goes back much further than that. And again, it goes back to ancient mythology. I mean, people were spirited away by the fairies, they call them, things like that. There's a particular one, I think there's a few in the Bible, of course. There's one, and it's kind of bugged me what his name is now. And he's taken away as like a 19-year-old lad, and he comes back and he realizes that the entire village is much older. It's actually been like 80 years since he was there, and he meets a person who remembered him as a child. Mm. And it's like, what kind of experience for a person to write that down is let alone to be recorded into what effect is the holiest book in the world. I don't remember that from the Bible, but I know that it's very similar to the story of Rip Van Winkle, a man who he annoyed the fairies at some point, and he went and lay down in the woods to sleep, and he woke up and went home and found again the entire, many years, 20 years or so had passed, And everyone he knew was much older. Some of the people he used to know, his parents were dead, things like that. And of course, missing time does come about with the alien abduction. I mean, I've never heard of someone who's been abducted for years and years, and there's years and years of missing time, but sometimes several hours of missing time occurs. I've got a friend, actually, who experiences regular abductions, and he has missing time.
What do you think happens in that time that they're away then? So,
well, sometimes they don't remember. Sometimes their memory comes back to them. Sometimes it's retrieved with hypnotic regression, which I know is a controversial method. But sometimes the memory comes back spontaneously, and they describe sometimes being that some weird craft, a spaceship lands, and they often are invited on board. Sometimes they're taken on board, and then you sometimes you're given a tour of the ship, and then you have like medical examinations. Sometimes they take blood from you. Sometimes you're lured into sexual activity, like Antonio Villas-Boas, the Brazilian farmer who was abducted, and then you're let go. And then you don't even remember. Sometimes you don't even remember, but you arrive at your destination. For example, if you're driving along, you arrive like 2 hours late. Things like that.
Yeah, I'm trying to find that particular account. I think it's Zedekiah. He's the one who says that story, that he came back to the village where he grew up, and the only person who remembers him is a person who's now 80 years old.
So that's even mentioned in the Bible.
Yeah, that particular one. Of course, then you've got the story of Enoch, where he obviously goes to the stars and then returns, and his time is much later, and there are people who were younger and who are now older. And I guess even Jonah and the whale, I guess, perhaps could be an interpretation of that, because of course Jonah goes to the edge of the water, and someone throws a spear at the whale, and it bounces off the hull. It's metal. And he meets God inside the mouth, and then he spends 3 days in the mouth having dinner at the table with God, and then he's then returned to the surface a little bit later. I mean, those kind of stories are a bit like, you what?
Yeah, it could have been a USO, unidentified submerged object, which is like a UFO except it's underwater. It could have been that Jonah was picked up by one of those. I mean, it's things like Einstein's special relativity, which talks about this, is that the faster you go, time does go at a different rate depending on how fast you're going relative to someone else, which means that if you did fly off to a distant star and came back at very, very fast speed, it could take a very, very short period of time. Yet a long period of time, depending on how fast you were going and how far you went, a long period of time could have actually passed on Earth.
Yeah. Yeah, because that's right, because you're only observing time from this perspective, aren't you?
Yeah. That's it.
That's a bit of a mind screw for many people. It's like, I guess the most obvious example of that is in the Alien trilogy, or quadrilogy rather. That's what happens, how Ripley is sent away to have his hope, but comes back, and it's 57 years later.
Yeah, that would actually happen if you actually if you did that. If you actually travelled at very fast speed, that's actually what would happen.
So do you tend to follow like pop culture like kind of movies? I just mentioned like the Alien trilogy. Are they films that you generally watch with a bit of like, what's the filmmakers trying to take on this?
Some I do. I mean, there's some that I enjoy. There's a lot of movies I enjoy. I mean, I don't watch a lot of TV. I don't watch soap operas and reality TV. There are some good movies, though. I do like some good movies. I quite like the Alien films. They're quite good. I like Star Wars. I've always been a big fan of, and Star Trek. I think they're good.
Okay, so I guess Star Trek then. What do you think of the more recent 2 series?
I haven't seen those. I've just the original series and the Next Generation. I didn't watch it after that.
No, you jumped Space Nine.
I didn't. I haven't watched those ever.
That's the one.
I'll have to check those out.
I guess you have. There's like Discovery now, and there's Star Card, and our fans are like, "What is this? It's all political correct now, so we're not watching it."
I've heard a lot of people complain about that. Yes, I have.
As well, hasn't it? With the you turn your audience away, and you go, "Well, who are our audience now?"
Well, that's it. I mean, I think it's not going to work in the long run because I think they're going to have to start producing things that people like. I mean, I don't, like I said, don't watch a lot of TV. I go to see movies sometimes if I think they're interesting. I'll even review them. I like going to the cinema, but of course the cinemas are shut at the moment. I hope they reopen soon.
What was the last film you saw?
Oh, in cinema?
Yeah.
It was actually The Empire Strikes Back. They showed the Star Wars, the original Star Wars one. I remember seeing it when I was a little kid in the cinema, and I saw they were showing it again. It was just between the lockdowns. They decided to show a lot of old movies to get people interested in the cinemas. I thought, I'd love to see that again in the cinema, so I did go and see it.
I really wanted to go see Wrath of Khan, and they showed that, and I was working.
Oh, but yeah. Oh, you work shifts, don't you?
I do, yeah, and I was just like, I was so looking forward to seeing one showing, like on a Wednesday night. I'm going, I want to go see that. I could not get it off, save a lot of money.
Oh, damn it, yeah, that's it. I mean, it's always worth, I much prefer going to the cinema to see things. I went to see Eyes Wide Shut in the cinema because they were just showing it one night, so I thought I'll go and see that because I'd never seen it in the cinema, and I thought I want to see it in the cinema.
That is an incredibly esoteric film.
Very, yes. It's very, I mean, a lot of Stanley Kubrick stuff was, but this is by far his most extreme film in that respect. Very, very odd, very amazing. I mean, you could do amazing analysis of that.
Yeah, in fact, I became aware of Eyes Wide Shut when I heard Jay's analysis of it, who did like Esoteric Hollywood.
Right.
Yeah, so when I saw his review of that, I was just like, I'm going to go watch this film. And it's an incredibly esoteric movie with lots of different themes. Of an elite society and a welcoming of, strange deities and all that kind of thing.
Does make you wonder about whether that really goes on, whether there are these secret societies and in the elite, and they do that, and they actually do have weird meetings where they carry out these strange rituals.
Yeah.
In
Hollywood who claim that's the case.
Yeah, that's it. It's like,
I guess cult of Scientology and all that stuff.
Yeah. It's like the Ziegler character. He says to Bill, the main character, he says, those people weren't ordinary people. I could tell you their names, but if I did, you wouldn't sleep so well. Meaning that Bill would recognize those names. They were famous people, powerful people, politicians, actors, actresses, things like that. So.
Yeah.
Yeah, very, very.
Who's another actor? Obviously, Oliver Stone does a lot of films with an angle aimed at Hollywood and politicians that appears to be quite revelry. It's trying to reveal something at the same time as trying to tell a narrative.
Oh, right, yeah. I don't know how many of his films I've seen. I don't think I've seen, what was it, Platoon I saw. I have to watch some more of those, I think, at some point. I have to watch some more of Oliver Stone's.
Yeah, obviously his son's quite a prominent documentary filmmaker as well, Sean Stone.
Oh, yeah.
He actually hosts Watching the Hawks with Jesse Ventura on RT.
Oh, right, I've not seen it, but I know Jesse Ventura, of course, is very open-minded. He does like this conspiracy, he did this conspiracy series, which is very good, I remember.
That was quite a good series, actually.
Yes, that was very interesting. That was very interesting indeed. I have a website, Hospital Porters Against the New World Order. It's actually a series of websites, but if you look for that, you'll find it, HPANWO, HPANWO. My name's Emlyn-Jones, and check out my websites, my videos, my books, and learn a little bit about these very interesting things that you hear. They sound strange and they sound weird, but as I said, I think it's real. I think it's very important. Yeah,
the few threads that there are that appear to point to something much more tangible are really interesting for sure.
Yeah, very, very definitely.